Privyet Kagdela. Welcome to Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about gunfighting the right way with Judeo-Christian values and real-world first-hand experience. As you can tell from the intro, today is a Russian-themed episode. It's a Patreon request. If you want to become a patron, there should be a link in the show notes if I remember. If not, go to goodshepherdtraining.com. Anyway, comrades, settle in, grab a bowl of pilmeni or borscht, or maybe a glass of vodka, and enjoy this episode, Cartridges of the Motherland. So, I do believe the first modern military cartridge that Russia fielded was a 7.62x54R. Developed way back in the 1800s, and is still on use around the world on battlefields, Iraq, Afghanistan. It stood the test of time. If you want to think about this cartridge, it's real similar to the other main battlefield cartridges of its day, World War I and World War II, the 8mm Mauser and the American 30-06. So an easy way to think about this is a Russian version of the 30-06, although that wouldn't be fair because the 54R predates the 30-06, but it kind of hurts our American sensibility to call the 30-06 an American version of the 7.62 54R. But pretty much they're in the same vein, although the case is probably not as efficient and it's a little bit more archaic with that rim on it, which had reasons back in the day that don't really apply as much today, mainly extraction and headspace on the rim. That being said, pretty much anything the 30-06 will do, the 7.62x54R will do, very similar. And anything from deer hunting to elk hunting, anything like that, it's been around well over 100 years. So you're going to find, a menagerie of different loadings for that. And you can get some really good modern hunting loads for it. There was a time when you could get really cheap spam cans of surplus ammo for it. And what made this rifle popular, especially for us on the American market, was the Mosin Nagants that flooded the market for so long at such a cheap price. I mean, it wasn't uncommon to get Mosin Nagants all day long for under $100 and get an entire spam can of, I believe it was 440 rounds for well under $100. And that made it a favorite. It was kind of a poor man's prepper rifle, an easy way for a young shooter in college or whatever, or, a poor kid to get into shooting without a lot of money if he didn't care about his shoulder, because it was kind of a bruiser on the shoulder. But the Mosin Nagants really became popular in America because they were a good quality rifle at a very affordable price. And they obviously were chambered in the 7.62x54R, which is, again, very akin to a 30-06, which is a good round. So you're probably familiar with it there. There's a lot of other battlefield weapons, a little bit heavier. Your machine guns that are chambered in it, that are still chambered in it, that are still being used all around, the world. On battlefields like Iraq, Afghanistan, likely places in Africa that are still being used today. And that cartridge, again, has stood the test of time. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room. But I don't think there's any elephants in Russia. So maybe the bear in the room, because Russia kind of known for bears, right? The bear in the room, the quintessential battlefield cartridge of the 20th century, because it's what the AK shoots, and the AK is almost without an argument the quintessential small arm of the 20th century. It's been in conflicts ever since it was introduced. We ran into it in Vietnam, and we've been running into it ever since. We're still running into it in Iraq today, and Afghanistan up until we, forfeited threw in the towel not too long ago. But we're still running into it. It's still used by I don't know how many countries all around the world. And it's chambered in what I think is the quintessential intermediate rifle cartridge. And this next part I'm going to say is probably controversial. A lot of people will disagree, but I think the 7.62x39 is the best balanced intermediate rifle round, period, of all time. It is a beautiful balance of power, of stopping power, and weight. It has a good, let's say, power to weight ratio. I think a good balance. That being said, it wasn't developed for the AK-47. The AK-47 was designed to fire this cartridge. I don't know if it was the first. There was probably some experimental prototypes, but the SKS predates it, which is in itself a very good rifle, which when I was growing up was kind of like the poor redneck's hunting rifle, the SKS. It's a good intermediate cartridge. A lot of poor guys hunted deer with it because it was cheap and affordable and it worked. And there was a time when those were very cheap on the American market, and that's a very good quality semi-automatic rifle. Not so much anymore because the prices have really jumped up on them, but for a long time that was kind of, again, the poor man's prepper rifle, if not like the way to get into shooting, because it was a semi-automatic, reliable, good quality firearm, the SKS, that you could get back in the day for very affordable. They probably were cheaper, but I remember them being $129 all day long in racks at the store. It may have been give or take a few dollars from there, but $129 stands out in my mind. And you're talking a good quality battlefield rifle. But the SKS didn't last very long before it was replaced by the AK-47, which again became the quintessential battlefield weapon of the 20th century. It was designed to be used by conscript soldiers. You could argue, and I think effectively, that for a good, well-trained soldier, the M16, AR-15, whatever you want to call it, that style of rifle is a better effective tool for a well-trained soldier. And I would say that's a good argument. But Russia wasn't the goal for the Russian army at the time. It was to give an effective fighting tool to conscripts, to farmers and merchants and things like that all over the Russian Empire and all over its satellite states. And I think they pretty much proved that they designed a very effective weapon for that. Who knows how many different cultures who knows how many different languages and different backgrounds have effectively used the AK-47 all over the world and still are today. That is a testament to the effectiveness of, number one, that rifle, and number two, that cartridge. It's still a good cartridge, and there are still countries using that cartridge today that are very good, effective fighting countries that could use other cartridges, but they still use that cartridge. I do believe Finland still uses 7.62-39 as their go-to military cartridge, and they're not some backwater, third world country in Africa. Finland's a decent country. That round is effective. It's a good round. And I compared the 7.62 54R to the 30-06. I think it's most akin to the American 30-30. Now, totally different rifles, totally different application. But if you compare apples to apples in bullet style, like a good soft point, well-constructed bullet, the ballistics of a 7.62-39 are similar, I think most similar, to a 30-30 Winchester, which has a good reputation for medium-sized game and stopping power. Now, a full metal jacket, just your cheap bottom-of-the-barrel wolf ammo, is not great ballistically, but a good expanding soft point round is a good ballistic performing round. And the 7.62-39, again, I think, and I don't even own one, is the best balanced power to weight ratio intermediate rifle cartridge ever. So, it's going to go down a little bit of a rabbit hole on a preamble to this next cartridge. The Russians saw that the way that war was going after World War II, they did a quick study and realized that they didn't really need a full-powered rifle cartridge. Took the Americans a little bit longer, honestly. We went through the whole 7.62 by 51 ordeal with the M14 and then quickly dropped that like a hot potato in favor of the M16. And we had this idea of a very high velocity, small caliber, especially for like a battlefield implement. Very high velocity, very small caliber round, light, to carry a lot of ammunition. And this was during the Cold War, so I think it's fair to say that our number one threat was looking at large armies fielded by the Soviet Union. And it wasn't a bad idea to be able to carry a lot more ammo for the same weight. You know, because we talked about the power to weight ratio of a round. How about the firepower versus mobility ratio? I don't care, and this is an argument when I was commander of a tactical team, I would tell my guys, I don't care how fast you are. If you reduce the amount of stuff you carry on you, you can get there faster. I don't care how fast you can run. If you have less weight on you, you can run faster. The same thing with a soldier. The less stuff you have to carry, the faster you can get there, or the more stuff you can carry if each individual thing weighs less. Well, the American military, they kind of thought the same thing, and they looked at a light for the time, especially compared to everything else, a really light cartridge, meaning you could carry more of it into battle. And if you were looking at fighting, hundreds of thousands of conscript soldiers fielded by the Soviets, having more ammo is probably a good thing. So we developed the 5.56 by 45. You know it as the 5.56 or the 223 that we still use. It's the AR-15 cartridge, it's the M16 cartridge. And we developed that. Well, the Russians took a look at that. They ran into that, when we fielded it in Vietnam. They took a look at that, and they liked the idea. And I think it's fair to say they used that as a major influence on their next military cartridge, the 5.45 by 39. This is a great cartridge. Much like our cartridge, it's a high-velocity, small caliber round. As you can tell by the nomenclature, 5.45 versus 5.56, it's similar to the 5.56. It's similar in diameter, similar in velocity. And I believe we first ran into this in the Afghanistan conflict back when we were arming the Afghanistan rebels. That didn't turn out too well for us. But anyway, I have an old Soldier of Fortune magazine at home. I think the only one that I have. And I think it's cool because of the cover. I guess they had been getting rumors in Afghanistan of this new cartridge that did horrific wounds. And it was this cartridge, the 5.45 by 39. And I guess the Soldier of Fortune journalists ran into it and found somebody with this cartridge that had actually run into it and documented that it existed. Because at the time it was just kind of a rumor. Anyway, pretty cool. And it quickly gained a reputation for a nasty wounding round, and I think it deserves that reputation. So the 5.45 by 39, think of that as the Russian version of a 5.56, a high velocity, pretty nasty wounding round. Lighter, obviously, because it has a smaller projectile, and the heaviest thing on a round is generally the projectile. It's usually made out of lead, so lighter. And obviously they probably adopted it for the same reasons we did. You can carry more of it as a soldier into battle than a heavier round. Anyway, I think it was a good round. I think it is a good round, rather. It just never really caught on because the Cold War ended and the Soviet Union collapsed, and no real other major military power ever adopted it. So it kind of came in and just never really caught on much. Yeah, the Russians still use it, but they're pretty much the only ones. It's by no means as common as 7.62 by 39 ever was, or I think ever will be. That being said, I think it's a fine round for what it is. A lightweight, high-velocity, intermediate cartridge. I don't think it's as well balanced as the 7.62 by 39. I think it's better for its niche application, being able to carry more ammo on you. Anyway, that's the 545 by 39. Attention, comrade. You think this program is funded by Ministry of Defense like some cosmonaut program? Niet. Are you communist? Niet. So be good, malinky capitalist, and go to goodshepherdtraining.com. But seriously, this podcast is funded by viewers like you. So get your Popka over to goodshepherdtraining.com. You can become a patron. Get a lot of cool insider content on there. You can also just go to Venmo and send a few bucks like a good capitalist. Anyway, with that, hope you'll consider supporting the show. I'm probably going to throw this in as a funny ad in the middle of the show somewhere. So enjoy. So, thus far we have talked about rifle rounds. But what's a comrade to do when it's time to execute a bunch of political dissidents? Well, then you go to your pistol usually. And the Soviets used pistols a lot of times as a badge of rank, a lot of times to execute political dissidents. I wasn't just kind of saying that candidly. I do believe that outside the Lubyanka and other places like that, they executed quite a number of people. And that's sadly one of the things that the pistols were used for, either executing people on their own side or for whatever reason. The two main ones I'm going to talk about, and there may have been more, but the two main ones I'm aware of are the 9x18. Now, as you might be aware, the 9x18, if you're familiar with the 9x19, which is by far the most common pistol caliber in the world, the 9x18 is a little bit shorter than that, a millimeter shorter. It's a little bit less powerful. It's literally somewhere right in the middle of 9x19 and the 380 auto, the 9 Kurz, as it's commonly known in Europe or in Germany, but it's right in the middle in power. It's a fairly light projectile compared to most 9x19 rounds, and it's just a little bit less powerful. And I think for that reason, it never really stuck around. In fact, I do believe that Russia today does use 9x19 like most other countries. It's funny that usually one country on one side of a conflict will not adopt a cartridge from another side, even if they realize its merit. Like, we would have never adopted the 7.62 by 39. Likewise, the Russians weren't about to adopt the 5.56. But it seems like the 9mm, which was developed by the Germans back in World War I, was so good that everybody adopted it. I mean, we adopted it, our military adopted it, our police have adopted it, the FBI adopted it, and people on both sides, the Soviet Union, or Russia now has adopted it, I believe. Pretty much all the major players adopted the 9x19. But before that, there was a 9x18. And I think that little bit less power, it accomplished everything that it needed to, given the task that pistols played in the Russian army or the Soviet military at the time. And there's another cartridge that I think is really cool, but it was kind of overpowered for what I believe the Soviet Union used its pistols for, and that was the 7.62 by 25. And this is a high-velocity bottlenecked pistol round. I've compared the Russian cartridges a lot to American cartridges so that you can wrap your mind around it a little bit better, kind of get them into terms that we can all picture and understand if you're familiar with American cartridges or even just common military cartridges like the 9x19. If I had to pick a comparison for the 7.62 by 25 Tokarev, it would be the 357 SIG. It's a high-velocity bottleneck pistol round. I think it was kind of ahead of its time. I think it did quite well in submachine guns. In fact, I remember running into some of those submachine guns in Iraq myself, and they're still good guns. They're still, I think, relevant on battlefields. They're still a perfectly fine submachine gun. And I think that round is fine for that. And although it was chambered in pistols, the 7.62 by 25 Tokarov, I think it was a little bit hotter than necessary. And for that reason, it kind of suffered the same fate as the cartridge I just talked about, the 357 SIG. They're both really good rounds. They're both really powerful pistol rounds. But you got to look at the role that the pistols really serve. And with the exception of us here in America using the 45 ACP as an actual really powerful and effective pistol cartridge on the battlefield, most other countries, especially European countries, for cultural reasons or whatever, didn't really view the pistol that way. It was an officer's weapon, a badge of rank, and to execute prisoners, sadly, and things like that. It was something you gave somebody that wasn't generally going to go into battle and fire a weapon. There's a lot of other roles on a battlefield. You know, a squad leader's weapon, or whatever the Russian version of a squad is, their role is not necessarily to lay down fire. Their role is to get their men where they need to be, like moving pieces on a chessboard, or an officer sitting in headquarters or something like that. And for that, the Russian pistols worked fine. I think they saw that the 7.62 by 25 was a little bit more powerful than they needed, and for everything that they needed, the 9 by 18 worked just fine. Anyway, I figured it was worth discussing the pistol cartridges of the motherland of the Soviet Union. Both the 9 by 18, which again falls somewhere in between the 380 and the 9 by 19, and the 7.62 by 25, which is a really hot pistol round, which works really well, I believe, in subguns. But I don't believe it works so well in a pistol. I think it's a little bit hotter than is needed. Anyway, with that, I think we're going to wrap up. I think that's the last cartridges we're going to talk about on this episode. Cartridges of the Motherland. I hope you liked it. If you notice some background noise, I'm doing this mobile. The wife and I had a road trip today, but I still wanted to get out an episode to you guys. I appreciate you. I'm humbled that anybody listens to this podcast, and I thank you for listening to all the podcasts. So that's going to bring us to the wrap-up of this episode, the tactical tip of the day. A lot of times I forget that not everybody, knows all the military stuff, and what's really common to know for pretty much anybody that was in the military, not everybody knows that. So you may not know about red lenses on lights, especially flashlights. There's a reason that a lot of military loadouts, like when you dump your pack and you have to have a certain amount of thing in your line 1 gear, line 2 gear, that they'll list a flashlight with a red lens. And that is so it doesn't ruin your night vision. And I'm not talking about like night vision nods, like the new age, seeing in the dark, super spooky stuff. I'm talking about your actual ability, your human eye's ability to see at night. If you turn on a regular white light, that kind of kills your night vision, and it takes your eyes a long time to adjust. If you use a red lens flashlight, it will not do that. So with that being said, that's your tactical tip of the day. You may find an application for a red lens flashlight. They do exist. A lot of times you can just get them as filters. I don't know why they're not really common anymore. It used to be you could get mag lights and stuff with a red lens filter, or with a bunch of different color filters for reading maps at night and things. Of all the cool new tactical flashlights and EDC lights, I'm not aware of any that come with a red lens or a red mode. Some might, but if you see that's why that exists. That red light, it helps you see at night without ruining your night vision. That's your tactical tip of the day. Oh, and it just occurred to me, we are probably in the highest threat we've been in for a nuclear war since maybe the Cuban Missile Crisis. So I probably should mention a tactical tip about radiation, because radiation is bad. So pectin is a way that you can get rid of radiation in your body. Now, obviously, you don't want to get nuked, and you don't want to get nuclear fallout in the first place. So that old saying, an ounce of prevention, yada, yada, yada. But if you do, pectin, just regular old pectin, like you use for making jam, for whatever reason, and I'm not a molecular biologist, obviously, because I can barely say it. I'm not one of those. But pectin removes radiation from the human body. So maybe have some pectin. Or know a good natural source of pectin. A lot of jams have pectin. So if you have jam in the apocalypse, you can have some apocalyptic jam that gets rid of radiation. Or just have the pectin on hand, just in the concentrated form. Or you just got to find some currants, because currants have pectin, a natural source. Anyway, that's another tactical tip. Hopefully we don't have to worry about that, but there you go. Tactical verse of the day. I'm going to give you a long one from memory here since we're on the road, but very fitting with a tactical tip. Psalm 91. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say to the Lord, you are my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I will trust. Surely you shall deliver me from the snare of the fowler and from the perilous pestilence. You shall cover me with your feathers, and under your wings shall I take refuge. Your truth shall be my shield and buckler. I shall not be afraid of the terror by night, nor of the arrow that flies by day, nor the pestilence that walks in darkness, nor the destruction that lays waste at noonday. 1,000 may fall at my side, 10,000 at my right hand, but it shall not come near me. Only with my eyes shall I look and see the reward of the wicked, because I have made the Lord, who is my refuge, even the Most High, my dwelling place. No evil shall befall me, nor shall any plague come near my dwelling. For you shall give your angels charge over me to keep me in all my ways. In their hands they shall bear me up, lest I dash my foot against a stone. I shall tread upon the lion and the cobra. The young lion and the serpent I shall trample underfoot. Because I set my love upon you, therefore you deliver me. You set me on high, because I have known your name. I call upon you, and you answer me. You be with me in trouble. You deliver me and honor me. With long life you satisfy me and show me your salvation. Amen. Paka paka. Have a blessed day.